Another week has flown past, so it's time to discuss my Week 3 power rankings for the Overwatch League 2019 season. As usual, I'll link the power rankings video in the description and comments down below, but otherwise, let's get into my breakdown for why I ranked each team where I did. I will start by grouping my bottom 3 teams together, in which we have the Washington Justice, who remain at 20th, the LA Valiant dropping 4 spots to 19, and the Florida Mayhem also dropping to 18, a fall of 2 positions. These 3 teams currently sit at the bottom of the overall rankings, with the Justice and Valiant winless, and the Mayhem's only win coming against a weakened Fusion's side. It is clear, as many people had thought prior to the season, that Washington simply don't have the quality on their roster for early success. Their synergy and coordination is noticeably improving week by week, and the team seemingly have a solid tank core behind Janice and Corey. Yet, until someone steps up to make clutch plays, or Wizard Hyung coaches some new strategies and compositions, this team will be held back by its poor ultimate management and inability to engage properly. As for LA and Florida, they have for the most part been quite competitive in their series they've played, with talent like Space and Izzyaki for the Valiant, and Apply and McGravy for the Mayhem playing well and developing. However, despite some obvious talent and potential for both squads, from which you'd expect better results, they seem to have become a little predictable, with both main tanks Swan and Fate often being targeted for their over-aggression. Admittedly, the Valiant schedule has been one of the hardest so far, but until these teams can show a little adaptability and win in key moments, they are likely to foot both the standings and my rankings. At 17, I have the LA Gladiators, who have fallen 6 places, behind the Houston Outlaws, who rise 1 spot to 16, and then Chengdu Hunters, who are 15, having also dropped by 5 slots. Each of these teams has talent, albeit in different positions and dynamics, with each showing that it can compete in most of their games. For the Gladiators and Outlaws specifically, the players on their squads have the potential to propel them right up into the top 10 and playoff contention, but it's been miscommunication and poor ult management that has held them back so far this season. This particularly centres around how their backline supports interact with the engagements made by their tanks on the front lines. For Houston, too often we see Raucus being killed first in teamfights when caught out of position, and on the side of LA, it is frequently Raw or Hydration who are killed when they overextend. It would not surprise me to see these 2 teams rise if these issues are sorted. As for Chengdu, however, they are a very difficult team to rank, as they do not play by the same meta as the rest of the league. As we have seen, when they win, it is in narrow fashion, but when they lose, it can be rather one-sided, and they may need to think more outside the box with their strategies moving forward, as it seems that they might be becoming too predictable and easy to prepare for, especially when running their Hammond. Next up, we have the Shanghai Dragons at 14, moving up 4 times, followed by the Boston Uprising, returning higher by 7 positions to 13. The Seoul Dynasty are heavily penalised 6 slots and dropped to 12, and lastly, the Dallas Fuel returned to my Week 1 ranking at 11, up 4. The 4 teams I have mentioned here suffer from the same problem, which is that they all have high potential and skill ceilings, but too often don't reflect this in their series and revert to their low floor of play. Particularly, the main tanks for all of these teams are really good and play well when they engage aggressively. However, in the particular case of Fisher and Fusions this week, both Boston and Seoul seemed quite reluctant to play aggressive even when they got the first pick in teamfights. As for Shanghai and Dallas, these 2 teams played each other close this week and will rematch one another next week, with both sides showing steady improvement week on week, as they seem to have found the players that make up their best rosters, which will help them moving forward. If the macro play and strategy is improved for these teams, they could find themselves making playoff pushes in the future. Quickly, at 10, we have the Hangzhou Spark up 3, and at 9 remains the Guangzhou Charge. These teams find themselves in the upper half of the middle pack by virtue of how close the parity of the teams has been this season. The Spark and Charge have shown that they can compete with the top teams, and the Diva players for both sides have been the top standouts, with Rio and Hotba having very strong starts to the season. The times when these teams have struggled has been when they have not adapted properly to their opponents, but these issues appear to have been identified from what we saw this week. Hangzhou must find which main tank they prefer out of Gushui and Nosmite, as shown by how London handled Gesture and Fisher last season, as well as ensuring Bebe has support, given how often he is focused in teamfights or misuses his transcendence. As for Guangzhou, I'd like to see more Sombra from them, from Eileen and Hopper, whilst continuing to show their flexibility between triple DPS and GOATs. The London Spitfire again move up 4 spots to 8. The Philadelphia Fusion remain at 7. Toronto Defiant continue their improvement, up twice to 6th, and the Paris Eternal drop 2 spaces to 5th. In my opinion, at the moment, these are the teams who are shown to be in the second tier of play in this meta, behind my top 4. After a terrible week 1, London has adapted its roster to great effect, moving Prophet over to Zarya and having guard flex between Brigitte and Sombra. They have since improved in every game. The coordination ultimate usage has become very impressive for the Spitfire lineup and now looks to have found its feet, and as long as they continue to show that they are slowly mastering GOATs, they should make the Stage 1 playoffs. Philadelphia remain at this spot, despite their close series with Washington, but I will give them the benefit of the doubt, as Boombox, despite returning, still did not look 100%. And when he did seem to get into his groove, the team looked very strong on maps 3 and 4, showing the potential they can realise, but they will need to show this against stronger teams moving forward. Also, they must look at their inability to play Rheingoats with Sado in the side, as he looks uncomfortable not on Winston. Perhaps Fraggy should get his shot. Moving on, Toronto continues their understated improvement, and even at this early stage, I might want to consider them a sneaky dark horse from the expansion sides. The Defiant have never looked out of any series, always making them competitive. It appears that Envy is out for vengeance, following his dropping from the league last season, whilst Ivy and Neko provide great complements in arguably the 2 most important positions, Zarya and Zenyatta, in the 3-3 meta. Despite their loss to New York, they gave them as good as a series as any other team, and along with their flexibility and adaptability, this roster could rise even higher than where they currently stand. Lastly, Paris looks simply rubbish in their series against Atlanta, but given how strong their opponents were, and the fact that they may have just been having a bad day, I won't overreact too quickly. Yet, as they've only played 3 games at this stage, the final 2 weeks will be crucial to confirm whether their aggressive style of GOAT is as good as previously shown, or instead, Ben Best and Cruz will be penalised for this aggression, as in the Atlanta series, where they were the main targets. In my top 4, we have the San Francisco Shock at 4, having risen 1 spot, the same number as the Atlanta Reign at 3. Meanwhile, both the Vancouver Titans and the New York Excelsior remain at 2nd and 1st, respectively. From what we've seen so far, these 4 teams have stood out within this meta. Particularly, the Shock, Titans and Excelsior are in my opinion the best 3-3 teams in the league. The reason I have Atlanta above the Shock, however, is because they have shown a greater level of adaptability and flexibility against their opponents, whilst also being overall better with their alternate management. This is perhaps my main issue with the Shock, who have been great so far all round, except that their play sometimes reflects their team's overconfident attitude, with Sinatra unnecessarily using his grabs in 1 teamfights, or Violet, despite fragging, being overzealous with his transcendence. I will conclude with Vancouver and New York, who are both still yet to lose a game, and in my opinion, have the strongest starting 6 in the league. Their position here are more dictated by the fact that New York has played more games than the Titans, having looked equally as dominant in those games. One word of caution for each side is as follows. The Titans need to be careful that their uber-aggressive engagements behind bumper don't inflict too much self-harm, as we have seen at times throughout their series, which may be harder to win by their own skill against stronger opponents. The Excelsior, meanwhile, must ensure that they are decisive in terms of their objective play, as both the games against Toronto and Seoul highlighted that they didn't necessarily manage their time and engagements properly, perhaps a result of a little overconfidence. With that, I've finally reached the end of my power rankings breakdown, and I'd like to thank you for watching. If you have any different opinions, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Otherwise, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed for more Overwatch League content moving forward.